So hello everybody, welcome back to our third, I think it's our third session, which is amazing. It's so lovely to see everyone. And we have some amazing speakers today. So I am going to share my screen. Let me just quickly share my screen and then we can kick off. Let me do this. And where's my share? I'm not seeing it. There we go. And is that okay? Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah? A second. What can you all see? I think you may be. There we go. So I want to welcome everyone to our third session. Today we have Geordie, who I think a lot of people who are in the vegan community already know Geordie, and I cannot wait to hear his story and the work that he's involved in. But he's a vegan zoologist and he's an activist for vegan and animal rights. And then we will be hearing from Asia from her allotment, and we'll have a presentation from her on that. And again, we'll open the floor to Q&As. So please, can everybody direct their Q&As to Prashant, and he'll collate them on the chat. We are going to be keeping our microphones muted. So when anybody's not speaking, like myself, then we'll mute ourselves. And then we will go back to Shabir, because that's the reason why we're here. Shabir has been doing Veganuary for the past month so far. So he's doing really, really well, I have to say. So we will be hearing from him how his past week has been. We'll also watch a video from the Swan charity on one of their projects that your money is going towards, anybody who is raising money. And then we'll have a look at his final total for this week. Yeah. It'll be an exciting session. So, Prashant, I don't know if you want to introduce our speaker, but let me stop sharing.
Yeah, I think we can, Jordy, if you wouldn't mind, I think you can kind of start off with a self-introduction. Let people know about the work that you've done, why you're famous/infamous. And then we can get started with veganism and intersectionality.
Okay, so yeah, no problem. First of all, I must warn you, I have a huge cold. So my talk will be peppered with cough, sneezing, a crackly voice, and a nose completely packed up. So I might have, I must speak slowly, otherwise you won't understand a word I'm saying. Yeah, I'm a zoologist. I've been vegan for over 20 years now, and I've worked in animal protection all my life for different organizations as a freelance, as an undercover investigator, as a campaigner, head of policy, many jobs. But I'm mostly known for the fact that I was involved in a litigation case that led to veganism, ethical veganism in particular, being declared by a judge a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act 2010. And that's what I'm most known of. And I wrote a book about ethical vegan, which is talking the story about how I did it. That's how I was mostly known. But the talk today is about veganism and intersectionality. And why I am talking about intersectionality, I'm not kind of the classical person that talks about intersectionality. So why I am, well, because in my book, is my book, by the way, Ethical Vegan, a Personal and Political Journey to Change the World, I write about it. And I have written in other articles about it. So I have experienced the process of researching and looking into it. So I think I can say something about it. But it's a controversial subject. And because it's a controversial subject, is something I never hide away from controversial subjects, and many people do, and I understand why they do it. But I don't think I have anything to lose. So therefore, I like sometimes to tackle gray areas, controversial subjects. I feel that that's part of my role, my self-imposed role, just to tackle all of these things. So I'm happy to talk about it. But I must say that I don't use the word intersectionality anymore. I decided to change it, and I call it now overlappinality, from the term overlapping. I will explain why. But in my book, I still use the term intersectional, but I now prefer to use overlappinality. I will explain why. But well, let's just start with the beginning, veganism and intersectionality. Let's start with veganism. I mean, you're all vegan, but let's remind us all ourselves what is the definition of veganism created by the Vegan Society, the word created in 1944, the official definition finalized in 1988, which is a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. In dietary terms, it denotes the practice of dispensing with all products derived wholly or partly from animals. Anybody that follows this definition is an ethical vegan. Why did I add the word ethical vegan there? Well, because many people only follow a vegan diet, but they don't follow any other aspects of the definition. And sometimes they call themselves vegans, and that confused many people. So in the 80s, people started using the word ethical to meaning the true vegan, the one that follows the actual definition of veganism, just to prevent confusion. So I am an ethical vegan, and many people are. And ethical veganism is what has been protected under the Quality Act 2010, not just having a vegan diet, just ethical veganism. I like to talk, though, about how people become an ethical vegan, because I think there are 5 gateways. I call this term gateways into ethical veganism. And I use this metaphor I like to use. It's called the vegan mansion. I imagine the veganism is a huge house, like a huge mansion, enormous, with a lot of rooms and a lot of things. And it has 5 doors. They're all equally big, but they have different styles. And when you enter the door, you'll find a vestibule decorated with that style. And then when you're you're just in the room and exploring, and then you can explore the entire mansion. And these doors, these gateways, is what I also call the dimensions of veganism. Spirituality, which is probably the first door ever created. The first vegans were linked to religion and spirituality. Then animal rights, the most well-known one, health, the environment, and the last one is social justice. And this is the one we're going to be talking today. Today we're talking about the 5th gateway into veganism. It's not smaller than the other ones. It's as big as the other ones. It's perhaps more modern in the order that they were created. But once you are in, it's not that there are 5 types of vegan philosophy. It's just entering veganism through those gateways. But once you are in, you normally embrace the 5 dimensions, as I have done. If you just started being vegan, you might have only embraced one so far, had time to explore the mansion. But if you've been for a long time, like myself, then you will be able to be exploring all these 5 dimensions. And I have done so. So the social justice gateway is the one related to intersectionality. So when I use the term social justice vegans these days is what I used to call intersectional vegans. So social justice vegan, I now call them intersectional before I call them intersectional vegans, I can actually call them overlapping vegans. I prefer social justice vegans. So my new terms is rather intersectionality, overlappinality, and rather than intersectional vegan, social justice vegan. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. But what is intersectionality before we're talking about the vegans? Intersectionality is a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of social and political identities, such as race, gender, sexuality, class, ability, etc., might combine to create unique modes of discrimination. Essentially, it means you might be discriminated for several reasons. You might be black, you might be a woman, but all these things together, they are more than just the sum. So when you overlap these 2 types of discrimination because of 2 types of identities you carry, there is something more than just the sum of your problems. And it was initially used in the context of feminism to highlight how other factors such as race and sexuality may intersect with it. That's why the word intersection was used. And was first coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw. She is a civil rights activist and a legal scholar, and she wrote a paper for the University of Chicago Legal Forum that was titled Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex, a Black Feminist Critique of Anti-Discrimination Doctrine, Feminist Theory, and Anti-Racist Politics. I'm just going to give you a sentence that she wrote. She said, because it explains essentially what intersectionality is. She said, because the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism, any analysis that does not take intersectionality into account cannot sufficiently address the particular manner in which Black women are subordinated. So it's this idea that the sum is not the sum of all the problems, it's something else that emerged from having to experience them together. So essentially, intersectionals believe that sexism, racism, homophobia, ableism, classism, all these isms are interconnected through what they call the matrix of domination, which will never be dismantled by addressing all of these issues separately. Essentially, the bad guys, the ones that are oppressive, are the same guys, are the same ones. They oppress different victims in different ways, but the bad guys are the same ones. It makes sense then that you not treat them separately if they have something in common, the bad guys, the oppressive culture. Right. So, but they have the first element of controversy. There'll be more. I'll tell you about this later. But the first one is that some people started to complain about the use of the word. They thought that the concept has now been co-opted by others, vegans, for instance, and black females who originally used it. And only talking about race and gender now have been marginalized again because we use it instead and don't give them a voice. That's a valid point. That's why they said, okay, I don't need to use this word. I can use the concept. I can use another word to replace it if that makes people happy. I don't know whether Kimberly Gray should complain. Probably she never complained. I haven't heard of that. Maybe other people, but it doesn't matter. If we can use a word that everybody feels happy about it, so that's why I decided, okay, I'm not going to use it again in case this is a genuine complaint that comes from a genuine people that don't prefer not to use this term. So, and actually overlapping is more graphically close to what we're talking about because an intersection, two roads that intersect is just the point. But a overlapping is a region. You have two diagrams, Venn diagrams. The part in the middle, that's the overlapping part of the two circles, is an entity in itself, not just a point. And I think overlapping actually describes better what this means. So what about the social justice vegans, the intersectional vegans? Well, they believe that as you should not ignore the overlapping between racism and sexism, you should not ignore either the overlapping between speciesism and any other cause of discrimination, prejudice, and oppression. So basically, they adding speciesism in one of those isms that the intersectionals were already looking into. So that the non-human animals elements. Therefore, a social justice vegan is an ethical vegan who avoids all animal exploitation mainly for the social justice reasons of all non-human animals being the victims of oppression, which is as important as the oppression to humans, or of humans. For social justice vegans, fighting for the rights of marginalized groups of humans and fighting for the rights of animals are fights that overlap, and therefore it is consistent to fight them together. So this is the idea. This is not a new concept, by the way. The word might be new, but the idea is all. I mean, they've been intersectional vegans or social justice vegans or vegetarians in history. So the vegetarians of the French Revolution, they were fighting for human rights and they were vegetarians. The anti-slavery William Wilberforce created the RSPCA. He was an animal person. The anti-vivisectionists of the 19th century, Dr. Anna Kingswood or Francis Power Cobb or Deb Bezan, they were all vegetarians too. And they were all feminists too, and suffragettes as well. So there's a little bit of history of that. And currently there are many people that have this label of social justice vegans, well known, like Marty Keel or Carol J. Adams, Angela Davis, Afko, Dr. Brice Harper. They are well known. Some of them, they don't use the term intersection anymore. They decided not to use it. They don't like it anymore. They use overlappinality as well. But they used to be described as such. But there are other elements of controversy, because this is an interesting thing. So an interesting philosophical tenet of overlapping veganism is the belief that the subjugation of animals is inextricably linked to the subjugation of other humans, and one cannot be solved without advocating against the other. And that makes some people uncomfortable, because they think what it means is that the vegan revolution will never happen if you don't address the human problems first. And that's a genuine complaint, or generally worrying, I would say. Although, of course, there's just theoretically, because you can find many causes at the same time. Now, some vegans actually have gone to an extreme and they become anti-intersectionals, as they don't like seeing the focus of attention being removed from non-human animals, and they see most vocal militant intersectionals as too divisive and disruptive. On the other side, some social justice vegans have become anti-mainstream veganism, because they see it led by the dominating oppressive demographic, mostly privileged heterosexual label, cisgender white men. And they see it far too tolerant of oppressive voices and inequality. Normally, most vegans are in the middle, so they just tend to choose whoever their friends like to approach have on these. And it doesn't help either that some intersectionals that are not vegans, they just blamed, or they say that veganism is classist and now everybody can become vegan. And also, there are some vegans that are perhaps far right or just right wing, anti-work vegans, that they use this intersectional as an insult almost, as a slur word. Anybody that they don't like, any feminist they don't like, any human rights or gay rights or even vegans' right person, they will label it as intersectional as it was an insult, because obviously they see that as a kind of the woke part of the being woke, and they don't like it. So that happens too. So that's why it has been controversial issue, and it triggers some people. Therefore, it's better sometimes not to use that word and use another one that perhaps is less triggering than this. But I believe it's a good thing. I believe that is a healthy approach, because it's just an approach. It doesn't mean to you change anything other than you widen your way of looking at things. You put more variables, you get more information on the table. You're likely to get better answers if you do that. So I think it's a healthy approach to be to use opinality as looking at the problems you try to solve, because you're going to get many advantages. I'll give you 7. For instance, it can encourage you to reflect on your actions. For instance, all the products that are labeled as vegan friendly might actually be cruelty free. These being humans being exploited by producing them. It opens your mind on those sort of things. It can expand your understanding of how others see the world. People from colonized nations or who have been the victims of sexual assault may have a very different way of interpreting servitude and violence. So when you're doing vegan outreach, you need to understand how people see the concepts that you're using, and that allows you to do that. It can also help you to untangle all the causes that you're already fighting for. You probably have fighting for many causes, but they're untangled. You can be more efficient in doing them, using less energy and to achieve more. It can address some of you remaining cognitive dissonances and blind spots biases. For instance, that most people forget that humans are sentient beings. They are animals too. So you can't just say, I'm going to protect all sentient beings and ignore humans. It makes no sense. It can facilitate the debunking of unhelpful myths, such as that veganism is a white thing or is a modern thing. It isn't been there forever. Even if the word vegan was created in 1944, the whole concept's been there forever. My book talks about millennia. It can help to resolve identity conflicts. If you think that you cannot be both a Muslim and a vegan at the same time, normally you then discover that you can. There is no reason that you cannot have several identities on top of each other. And it can open veganism up to new cultures and demographics, meaning we're going to have more vegans, and we have more vegans, more decision power, more policies that can be passed that are vegans, that are vegan friendly. So really opens the door to more people entering the vegan buncheons through this 5th door, because they might have been scared of the other 4 doors, and this one they find that it's more like them and feel more comfortable. But let me finish just by saying, so why I'm saying this, because I might not be the right person, I said earlier, to saying this. Well, I just wanted to point out that sometimes discrimination and penalty affects the people that you don't expect should affect. For instance, I am a neurodivergent person. I'm an atheist. I'm a conscientious objector. I'm an immigrant from Catalan origin. All these are sources of discrimination in my life. So I know what it means to have several reasons of being discriminated, because I have several reasons of it. But I'm aware that I'm a cisgender, heterosexual, middle-aged white man. I'm aware of my many privileges. So if somebody said you should not be talking about this, you should not be using this term, let us do it, I will be happy just to move away and let other people do it. But unless somebody stopped me so far, I'll carry on doing it, because that's a way to elevate those that have been silenced. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. That was really, 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 really interesting. And it's so important, as you were saying, that it's okay that I think the change in the term intersection to overlapping is so relevant, particularly in our community, Muslim community, where we can be both of those two things, or at least understand the ethics behind it and agree with those ethics. I know, Arsia, you've been vegan for a long time. I have not, and I'm struggling this month. But you know what? It's been an eye opener for me. So I really really appreciate you spending the time and speaking about this topic of intersectionality. And next, everybody keep all of your questions, put them on the chat. Prashant is putting them together. It was a really, really good talk. Arsia and her lovely sister Irfana have joined us to give us a little talk on growing your own and stories from the allotment, should I say. And Arsia, did you want me to share your PowerPoint, or do you want to do that? Or I can't hear you, Arsia. Wait a second. You need to unmute yourself. There we go.
I'm happy to share.
Yeah. Prashant, have you made her a host?
I've just sent the request through.
Yeah.
Super.
You share your screen.
Yeah, sure. Correction. I've been vegetarian for many years.
Okay.
I've been I'll semi-vegan for a long time. Yeah, but I'm moving towards the light side. Yeah. Yeah. So can I share?
Yep, you can share. You've been made a host.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's go to the beginning. Yeah. Can everybody see what I'm seeing?
No.
Oh, okay, so let me come back to Zoom. So now can you see what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. So I wanted to Irfana's here. So my sister Irfana's here, and we both are at the allotment. We're at the allotment weekly or fortnightly. So I'll just introduce the allotment, and anytime you want to jump in Irfana with anything, please do. So from the age of 14, roughly, I have cared about animals and animals' rights and animals' habitats and animals' kind of biodiversity and not wanting species to go extinct. It used to really distress me and so on and so forth. So I've been an environmentalist since I was since I was a girl, and then that moved into the way kind of campaigned, ate my food, etc. But it was really wonderful during lockdown to be invited to be part of a gardening community. And one thing that I want to bring it back to what Islam says, which is, can you see my whole screen, everybody?
I think you need to change to slideshow mode, which is just at the bottom.
There you go, yeah. The verses of the Quran, which ask us which remind us that we are stewards, we are, caretakers of this. Oh, that's not mine. What's happened here? That's not my screen.
Presentation on the top left. Go there.
Thank you.
But it's not working for some reason, so you might want to just go back to the view that you're on before.
Yeah, Asya, I think you can just use the PowerPoint and zoom in a bit on the PowerPoint. I think the font that you've used is fairly big, so we should all be able to read it. Sorry, the PDF. Acrobat. Yeah, there you go. And then just close the thing which says convert. Yeah, just close that and close that again. Lovely. Yeah.
So if I but it's
just scroll up.
Okay. Is that better? Yeah. So the verse from the Quran which tells us that we have a serious responsibility to care for all life on earth, not just our own sort of not just our own human concerns and endeavors. We need to take care of the nature systems and the ecosystems that kind of uphold all of life. So one thing that I'd done from the very beginning was involve children in food production. And in an urban setting, it's really important to recognize where your food comes from. So there's some children who live in an urban setting. So during lockdown, we had an invitation, very fortunate, to join a forest gardening community to restore a vegetable patch that had been fallen into disuse. So we'd go there on a fortnightly or weekly basis, depending on the seasons, and we'd follow the list of tasks, bring home the produce, and just immerse ourselves in what was there around us. And you can see how many, there's 4 different countries that people are from there: India, Nepal, Poland, and England, and different parts of the UK at that. So it was a fantastic community, and also intergenerational. So you had children, parents, grandparents as well. What was fantastic was the children getting involved with the senses, seeing, touching, tasting what the food was like. And what I really appreciated was the thing that used to bug me so much, when you go to a supermarket and you can instantly have anything from anywhere, which is so distorted and disturbing, actually, the accessibility. And those shiny packets I find just incredibly ugly and discombobulating. So that hitting the air miles, just zapping them out of existence, that was a big win for me. There was loads of conversations, produce, tea breaks, community the whole time. And we just learned so many different recipes, did we not, Irfana? For example, what's here is beans. Can you see these beautiful pink bright beans? And I was adamant, I don't eat beans, I don't like them, they're not my thing. And then one day, during a hungry spell at school, my sister Irfana, she said, I've made those beans. And I said, I'm not going to like them. But the way she just sauteed them in garlic and chili, they were bursting with flavor and absolutely gorgeous. I also wanted, well, I'll say that later, talking about air miles. But yeah, let's get to the end of the slideshow. So yeah, what the children learned and the family learned was that just to get a piece of food to the plate is a whole long process, and it follows rhythms, follows seasonal rhythms. So they became aware of the conditions needed for that, because it's an organic allotment. We don't use any pesticides. So, and it's a no dig allotment. So we're not we will pull out nettles, we will pull out brambles and things like that. But many of the weeds we just leave in. We create our beds, and then we often, particularly when it comes to potatoes and things like that, it's a no dig situation. You put the cardboard there, you put potatoes just under, straw at the top, and then they come through to preserve the sort of root system underneath, so that's been really precious for the children to recognize. Wintertime, again, allotments are always inviting in spring and summer when everything's bursting into life, but I particularly love it when it's quiet and empty and you're clearing out. So the whole space was, in the whole space of a year, it changed so much. And this is something that, whilst I was busy with elections, some of the other people got on with. They made a beautiful space with a cauldron in the middle, for sitting, for sharing, for storytelling, just made of old logs. So wintertime can be a real time of nurture, but much more quieter. You've got the silence, you've got the space, you the companionship. You sort of do jobs that are left behind. If 2 weeks ago I was there clearing out a big tangled up area, and we'd always ignored it. I thought, oh, maybe that it's meant to be like that, but Matt said to me, no, it's not meant to be like that. And I know underneath there's currant bushes, so him and I spent 2 hours just digging, working with the loppers, getting rid of all the undergrowth, and until eventually the little currant bushes were there. And he said, they may give fruit in spring, they may not, but let's see, at least we can see them now. At least they're not hidden behind this massive brambles and nettles. Super satisfying. So yeah, the children have really loved going there. They've kind of grown up there. There's a lot of, the tea break time, all the diverse people who come to it bring their stories. They've handled newts, they've handled toads, they've seen lots of different types of spiders. One time, I'll stop sharing now. A compost heap, sort of, we opened the door to the compost heap. There's different compost heaps. We opened the door to it, and a whole section of soil just fell out. And as the soil fell apart, we saw this intricate web from an ant's colony, and ants had created a colony there, and the thing fell apart, and we just saw the tunnels and the kind of little rooms and meeting rooms that they'd created, and we just saw the ant colony right in front of us, you know, absolutely extraordinary. So it's been a real privilege for my children to have had access to that. And yeah, I would love to see people just growing stuff within the community as much as they're able. NHS, there's a thing called NHS Forest Division, and that recommends time for people who, especially if they live in urban spaces, in green spaces, for their mental health, for reduced blood pressure, for all kinds of things. You know, it really has become something that the NHS prescribes. So there's so many multiple benefits of trying to grow your own food and sort of all going to a place where other people are doing that and getting your produce from that. Yeah, Irfana, do you want to add anything more? Oh, you're muted. Prashant, are you able to unmute Irfana?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am really glad to be able to talk about the community garden, because it's a space where I feel as though it's not just food that grows, but people grow a whole lot alongside the food. And I think immersing yourself in the natural cycles of growth, of nurture, of being in a green space and a blue space, and working with nature really closely, getting into the soil with your hands, getting into planting, sowing, transplanting, getting your vegetables to kind of train them to grow up trellises that you've made. We've done things like growth, old growth that's turned woody. We've made a dead hedge to border one side of the garden, and then there's a living hedge on the other side of the garden. And the process of composting, so anything that we pull up that might be a kind of invasive weed that might kind of take over the growth that we're trying to nurture, they go into different types of compost bins. So it's been such a learning process for me. I'm a science teacher, and I've got so much to take back to the classroom, to my kids. It's been absolutely fascinating to look at how the ecosystem is knitted and woven together. And the other thing about the no dig method, the fungi, the fungal hyphae that run through the soils, they're preserved. And they are the ones that allow the plant roots to be able to take up the nutrients in the first place. Because fungal hyphae kind of make sure the moisture is retained in the soil, and they have this mutualistic relationship with plant roots. So this kind of, whether you're looking at the kind of microscopic level with the microorganisms, or whether you're looking at the macroorganisms, so looking at all of the different kinds of worms and beetles and millipedes and centipedes and the tiny newts that live among, I mean, as you mentioned, the newts that live among the plant roots. There are many layers of discovery. There are many layers to the ecosystem. And I think immersing yourself in that is something that we're quite divorced from in modern society. The garden it's kind of recessed from the road a little bit. It's in between a kind of a blue space, there's kind of a river that runs by. And I think getting us and our kids to meet up in a space where we're working with the ecosystem, it's a really rare privilege. And I think kind of people walking by would have no idea that there's that much going on in terms of what's involved in food production, what's involved with seasonality, what's involved with nurturing plants so that you are, in a gentle way, you know, keeping the predators or the pests away. But at the same time, if the caterpillars get to the brassicas before we do, or the birds get to the seedlings before we do, we just shrug and say, okay, we'll just move on to something else. So it's been over the seasons and over the years, it's been quite a journey of learning what we can grow and when. So we have a polytunnel, looking at what will grow best in the polytunnel, developing more and more beds and clearing out older areas, because it was a garden that had fallen into disuse. So Asya mentioned the currant bushes, which had been overtaken by brambles and kind of lots of new kind of undergrowth. So just pulling that back and allowing the plants that we're nurturing to kind of come to the fore again. It's been wonderful. I've met so many different people, very, very different and very, very like-minded. So it's actually lovely to be connected to people because of their connection to the earth. And that's been really lovely as well. Yeah, it's a really peaceful place. And it's really nice to bring my mum and bring my kids and for everybody to mingle and kind of talk about lots of different things, but it's kind of veering off from the vegetables that we're growing. So yeah, it's been really lovely.
Thank you so much, Irfana. I really, really appreciate that input from yourself. And I don't know how many people here are involved in growing your own. I'm terrible at it. I tend to kill everything. And in fact, what grows best in my garden is, as you said, no dig. It's just the tomatoes, which died last year because I didn't take care of them. And they tend to grow up on their own every year without any input from me whatsoever. So that's good. I'm interested how many questions there are. Prashant, shall we open the floor to questions from you? Do you want to read them out one at a time?
Yeah, I can do that. I sent them to you, but let me read them out. All right, just give me 1 second. Okay, perfect. So the first question is from Megan. And she asks, there are a lot of overlaps between indigenous cosmologies and what you've called social justice veganism. For example, many indigenous cosmologies hold that human beings are inseparable from the animal world and the natural world. We exist and have a purpose in relation to each other. More broadly, it seems to me that there's often a spiritual dimension to social justice veganism. Is this something that Jordi, you have explored in your work? And I'm just gonna put the question down in the chat as well, so you have a chance to read it before you respond to it.
Okay.
Jordi,
yes. Well, my metaphor of the mansion is basically a way to show that overlappinality between spirituality and social justice, because they are both doors of the same house. So it's logical that when you enter the door and you move away inside from the vestibule, you will start seeing commonalities. The bits of the mansion in the middle are the same for each of the 4 doors. So the more you experience in veganism, the more you start to see connection between spirituality, health, animal rights, and it becomes quite obvious that we are talking about the general, very basic Sanskrit concept of ahimsa, do no harm. And when I experience vegan, you realize that the answer to whom am we talking about, who I should not be harming, the answer is everyone. So one could be the humans, the other could be yourself, health, the other could be the environment, the other could be other sentient beings. But this is the same principle, the same verb is not to harm. Do whatever you do not to harm whoever might be harmed. So of course there are connections, and I always find these connections. But it's also good and important to recognize that when people move into veganism, they are attracted to particular aspects, and we should not just force them to get the whole thing at once. It's good that they go in with the things that they like the most, that they enjoy, they absorb it, they confirm that they made the right choice, and then on their own volition move to whatever door they want to move, as opposed to be forced. So that's the other thing we have to consider. So the mansion is big, you're gonna leave that forever. You don't have to rush. You're gonna spend a lot of time. But if you find somebody that is telling you you should not be vegan for the environment or you should not be vegan for social justice, the chances is somebody that either hasn't entered the house yet or it just entered and sat there at the door and doesn't have any idea how big the house is, the mansion is. Then you just have to be patient because it's just new and it's just you can move away. But yeah, there's loads of connections and overlappings.
So, Arcia, I think you got your hand up.
So, Jordi, that's so fascinating. When you said social justice, I had a really different idea of what you meant. And I thought that you would go on to talk about how, for example, if I want steak every day, that's massively, that's so heavy on the environment and the carbon emissions that are created, and in terms of wildlife that's decimated because of the feed that's needed, and it's not sustainable, and therefore it's unjust for me to have it compared to much poorer people. That's what I thought you were going to say. So your idea of social justice differs from mine, but I'm really interested in that difference. I know that social justice is incredibly important in Islam, kind of, equity. So for that reason, that would be another reason for me not to have steak every day. Well, for me, anytime, but for example, if someone was much, earlier on in that journey, not every day, kind of reduce your meat. Does that make sense? But yeah, I really like what you said about speciesism. Just interested in different ways to explore that idea of social justice. Thank you.
Yeah, well, essentially, the key word is the social rather than the justice, because the justice is, you'll find it in all the 5 dimensions: environmental justice, animal rights justice, health justice. All that is, we find a situation is unjust and we try to break that situation to make it right and just. The word social is there to make point attention to human beings as opposed to the environment, as opposed to health, as opposed to non-human animals. So that's the thing.
Perfect. Great. We have a question from Farah. Has our way of life that's moved away from day-to-day interaction with animals made it easier for wholesale abuse of animals to take place? From an Islamic perspective, allowing oppression, subjugation of anything that has a direct impact on our soul and removes barriers against evil in our hearts, making doing those bad actions easier. I'm just gonna post this over here on the chat so everybody can read the question as well.
Is this a question to someone? Which has a comment.
I think, Farah, is that a question to Jordi? Or?
I think the first bit is a question. So has our way of life, this very urban way of life that we live now, which doesn't really have any interaction apart from with our cats and dogs and our gerbils, has that really accelerated this ability for society to kind of treat animals in the way that they are?
Well, I think in a way what happens is that the process of carnism, we use this term carnism, meaning the opposite of veganism, this indoctrination into believing that we can exploit anyone at will and everybody else there is therefore to serve us. This is manifested in any environment, urban, countryside, because it's been traditionally passed from generation to generation in written or unwritten rules. And what we do, vegans, is to challenge this and to basically say this is not a natural way of being human. This is something that we've been indoctrinated historically and culturally, and we don't have to follow it. We can live in harmony with everyone, not having to be dominated over everyone. But I can see that the more detached you are from the world, be that because you live in an urban environment, be that because you just live in a country and you never visit any other country, or you never spoken any other language, you just live in a bubble. So that obviously disconnects you from the reality of other beings. And the key thing about understanding these things is that this concept of other, whoever that other is, from other species, from other gender, from other culture, is someone that has the same rights that you, that has a point of view, and that might see things differently than you. And if you never experience the other, you're more likely to be the victim from others as well, because you will have severed the connection between everyone. And it will happen if you just live in an environment where you don't see any other sentient being other than you in flies and cockroaches, that your sense of other will be diminished and your ability to empathize with others will be handicapped.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next question is from Ed for Asia and Irfana. Is there a resource I can use for non-pesticide / organic growing of food on an allotment?
I would Prashant, is there a way for me to sort of get the answer back to you? Is that okay? Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of books, you know. And when I go to the allotment, I'm not one of the directors. There's 3 directors, and I happily follow orders. But they will know a lot. So, Ed, are you asking in terms of a book? Is that what you mean by resource? Or do you mean YouTube videos, or do you mean a kind of particular
Yeah, like any book or anything like that
Yeah.
would be useful, because I've just started using an allotment, so I wanted some guidance. So
Yeah, sure. Please let me get back to you. Is that okay? Yeah, let's stay in touch with Prashant, and I'll happily get back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, Ed, what I'll do is, are you on one of our WhatsApp groups? Yeah, perfect. So I'll send you the Vegan Organic Network's website. They have tons and tons of articles on growing organically and without using pesticides and whatnot. So yeah, just watch out for that, and I'll send you something fairly soon. Okay, those are all the questions. Does anybody have any comments? AC, I know you had a bunch of messages that you were sending with some really, really good resources. I was wondering if you would want to take a couple of minutes to share some of your thoughts.
Hi, yes. So I'm in Birmingham. I'm a member of the Green Party, but I'm also work at the Vegan Society, and I'm a life member of the Vegan Organic Network. So I'm familiar with Geordie's work, and I've just started helping to look after a community or mini orchard and allotment. So, you know, everything that everyone's been saying here today is such good advice. And, you know, finding ways to help people to connect to their food is so important. I was just posting in the comments, the Vegan Organic Network have some very good resources. For those of you who are not familiar with the work of Dr. Margaret Robinson, she's an Indigenous vegan who talks a lot about decolonizing, veganism and agriculture, and some really good resources you can look up for Dr. Margaret Robinson. So please keep your questions coming into the WhatsApp, and you know, we're always happy to help. And in other parts of the world, if you're connecting with people outside of the UK, the Vegan Organic Network is very sort of focused on our sort of climate that we have in Northern Europe, but obviously you'll need resources specific to different bioregions and climatic regions, and there are those resources out there. So yeah, thank you very much to all the speakers today. And everyone who's here.
I had asked in the chat. I don't I think Prashant had responded to me about like manure, the use of manure. Just I wanted to clarify something. So like my friend, she has a horse, right? And she's got loads of manure. And she said, come take it whenever you want to use in your garden. Is that wrong? Would you perceive that as wrong? AC?
So it's quite common for vegans to run animal sanctuaries, and therefore to rescue animals from farming and from, mass breeding. So, a lot of people are in this situation who are vegans. There are many reasons for not using animal manures from domesticated animals in farming, and somebody mentioned in the chat some of those, which is, for example, medications can contaminate your vegetables, and diseases as well. And the vegan attitude is basically that we don't need those, because there are already going to be animals within our garden that are free visitors who will come and go as they please. And so if you actually want to have your produce certified as being grown stock-free or vegan, you definitely wouldn't use that. And in the same way, you wouldn't use what's called humanure. For anyone who's ever used a composting toilet, you might understand what that means. So it's if you're talking in terms of right and wrong, that's not really the way I would phrase it. I would say, we're trying to move away from the industrial scale use and abuse of sentient beings. And so that's why we demonstrate through vegan, organic or veganic growing that it's just not necessary, because effectively, for example, a horse or a buffalo or a cow, they're like a sentient mobile composting machine. And, they don't create fertility in their bodies. The fertility comes from the plants and from the life of the soil. So yeah, I hope that's a sort of helpful answer.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I think my other question about what was it about? It was about production lines, that really if you want to change that wholesale kind of abuse of animals, then surely it should be like a systemic change to the way in which we produce food, as opposed to each individual one of us doing Veganuary and then becoming vegans. I mean, surely, if the steak wasn't available readily, then more people would start eating more vegetables. Do you know what I mean? And it wouldn't that be a more sensible way of going about things?
So I have very strong thoughts on this one. Veganism, like any other revolutionary movement, is a bottom-up approach. It's not a top-down approach. So yes, we can fight for legislation changes, we can fight for regulatory changes, we can protest outside meat factories, meat farms. All of that is good, and it's going to lead to systemic change. But at the same time, if the demand is still there, these factories are not going to shut down. If capitalism is still there, which drives huge cost of living crises for millions of meat eating, or even people who want to transition to a vegan lifestyle but they just can't afford to, because they have a really, really inexpensive and cheap source of meat that's coming through to them for their protein needs, carb needs, what have you. As long as we don't have a movement that's people driven, systemic change is never going to happen. And I think we've seen countless cycles of that in history, where until it's a people driven revolutionary movement, your top brass never makes any of those changes. But obviously, I think Megan, you should probably contribute to over here, because this is kind of your thing.
In my view, hi everyone, I'm Megan. You can't see my name there. In my view, it's both and. I mean, I think the way that capitalism is sold in countries like this one is that it's the natural order of things. It's the invisible hand. That's not true at all. It is put in place by people in power to maintain highly unequal, highly oppressive systems of power. So if meat is cheaper than vegan food, it's because of subsidies. It's because of this highly unjust and unnatural, I would say, system that has been created to maintain itself. So as long as that system is in place, it's going to be really difficult for a bottom-up change to happen. In many ways, there is no just consumption under capitalism. But at the same time, social movements have real power, and they have been effective, as Prashant said, throughout history. So I don't think that we should take that fact that carnism and capitalism are imposed from above as a reason to fall into fatalism and assume that we can't do anything, therefore why try to do anything. We can make changes in our lives, and we can demonstrate that capitalism is always contested from below. At the same time, we should push for systemic change. We should push for legislative change. We should disrupt the system to the extent that we can. So I would say, yeah, it is both ends, and we should maintain a view of the entire system as we make changes in our own lives.
I think there was one example that came up recently. There was a meat market in London, which
Smithfields,
Smithfield or something, which was shut down, or they converted to something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a testament to a lot of the local folks who live in the surrounding areas, that they have actually reduced their meat consumption to a point where the sellers just couldn't afford to keep their shops open. Now, it's bad that they lost a means of livelihood, but at the same time, there's a strong undercurrent of what are we consuming, how good is it for us, for the earth, and obviously for the animals. And I think that should never be overlooked.
Yeah, thank you so much. Were there any other questions? I'm not sure if there are.
Yeah, I was wondering, Jordi, if you had anything to add to that question.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it similar to what you said, but I have a slightly different approach. For me, you need both. If you cannot make a systemic change, you never get to the vegan world. You just get to a carnivore world with a lot of vegans. If you only have vegans and you don't change, so if you only have this the systemic change, but people don't follow the system because they're not vegan and they're on the side, they continue to exploit animals, even if it's illegal for the system, you haven't achieved the vegan world. You need both. But I think the reason that we need to get people vegans is not because we want to create vegan consumers. I don't think that the whole point is to have vegan products and vegan consumers. I am against that. What I want is vegans, people that have the vegan philosophy, and they end up having positions of decision power where they apply that vegan philosophy. Could be a member of parliament, could be director of a hospital. So you don't want products, you want vegans, because the more vegans you have, the more easy it's going to be getting to that systemic change. The systemic change in a democratic country is done by votes. We need to have more vegan MPs. How you get vegan MPs? We don't get them by giving them vegan sausages or vegan burgers. That's not what makes a vegan MP. A vegan MP is somebody that is persuaded that veganism is the way forward, and you don't have to tell him what he needs him or her to eat or not to eat. That's what a vegan already knows. So what we need to spread is the philosophy, not the behavior. For me, that's essential. The behavior is automatically coming when you have the right philosophy. If you only teach the behavior and not the philosophy, it will become a fashion. The behaviors change if they don't have anything behind them sustaining them. So the key point is to be sure that you make people vegan for life, even if they haven't started buying any vegan product yet. The product is only interesting in the mind of a capitalist person because it's all about money and the product is money. So we are not in that business of selling veganism. We're in the business of making vegans.
Yeah, that's really, I think that hits the nail on the head for me. It is about a mindset as opposed to these products. And this is the problem which I have. I think when I go and go to the supermarket and it's Veganuary and you see all of these vegan products, and really it is just capitalists who are just opportunists there making lots of money from people. And I do have an issue with that. But this is really, really fantastic. Were there any other questions, Prashant?
No, those were all the
Yeah.
questions we had.
Brilliant.
Unless there's anyone else with a question that we can address.
No, I think that it's time to
Yeah,
go
it's
to
time
Uncle
to go.
Shabir.
Yeah.
So can we unmute Uncle Shabir? I don't know. Let's see.
Yep, I have asked Uncle Shabir to mute himself.
Okay, hi everyone. I am here. I've been listening. It's absolutely fascinating. I think there's some things which there's complexities in there which are really interesting, but they're real, and we need to think about those. For example, as a Muslim, part of my stewardship and faith system is that the Almighty has created nature, and that I am allowed to use it, but use it in a way which is not exploitative and unnecessarily cruel. So if we want to create a world where everyone is vegan, then you have to overcome these issues where being an omnivore is allowed, explicitly allowed in Islam. And therefore, to get to a place where you're saying that as part of this, you need to become a fully fledged vegan, as in you don't believe in the consumption of meat, full stop, is problematic for a lot of Muslims, because they say, look, this is explicitly allowed, and that in the Quran it talks about that these other sentient beings, as you call them, yes, they can be used as part of their role in nature. So there's some really interesting things that you have to unpack for people of different faiths and people who have a different worldview. And I think the common factor, and that's why I really like Jodie's sort of analogy, is that if you think about the overlapping things, then okay, maybe we don't overlap in terms of can you or can you not eat animals, but we do overlap in the sense that there's something about within Islam, and I think within all proper religions, which is about treating everybody and everything with respect and not exploiting them. So I think that any Muslim who seriously looks at the meat industry would very probably become a vegetarian or even a vegan very quickly. Not for reasons to do with it's allowed or not allowed, but that it doesn't meet the Islamic criteria, that when you do consume it, it's got to be treated humanely. That's why we call humans. Yeah, it needs to be treated humanely, and you just can't argue that if you go to a commercial chicken farm or a commercial meat processing plant or whatever, because it explicitly isn't, being treated humanely. So there's some really interesting sort of questions there to unpack, and it's a way of moving some of this agenda forward for people who are never going to become vegans because it's not possible within their religious faith system to advocate that it's wrong to eat animals, for example, because it's explicitly allowed within the faith.
But I think Shabir, I think probably the difference would be is that unfortunately, particularly Muslims in the West, we've sort of moved to this situation where we say we have to eat animals. And if you look at the Prophet Muhammad's life, he hardly ate animals at all, and it was on sacrifice days. It was on those special occasions only, and it was for the distribution of food. And the reason why it's a sacrifice is because you would take care of the animal, you'd love the animal, you'd do everything for the animal, and it would be a member of your family, and you would have to sacrifice it. And that's why it was a sacrifice, as opposed to the meat industry that we have now. And I think that's the only reason why we can say, as Muslims, we can't be vegan, because we have to do that once a year sacrifice, but otherwise the rest of the year we could be vegan, and probably the Prophet Muhammad most of the time did not eat any meat at all. So I think it's about getting
I think that's fine, and I guess that was the point that I was making, that if we define it as it's impossible, you're not allowed, then that's problematic for Muslims, because it is allowed. But the overlap is in the whole notion of balance, social justice, but also justice for animals, and having ways of dealing with them which are just and kind and respectful and respectable. All of those things is a way that we can get to a much larger number of people and bring about some of the systemic changes that you were talking about, rather than trying to persuade people of our faith in large numbers to become vegan, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I hope that this is a direction that we can hopefully explore among the Muslim community. I think this is something which does need to be talked about. And as Shabir said quite rightly, a lot of the meat, well, probably all of the meat, the halal meat, is not what we talked about before, halal or tayyib, based on the fact that the animals are not treated with decency and kindness, or even the amount which is being produced. There's no way you can justify it having been produced or made in a halal way. It's just not. So yeah, I think there's so much there that we can do in the future, but it's about educating. How are you finding this journey now, Shabir? This is week 3. How are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm fine. As I said to you, for whatever reason, January has been the month of gatherings. So I seem to be at a gathering every single day, a gathering where there are 95% meat options and 5% others. And it's not really a challenge. I've never been that attracted to any particular sort of food that that I would I'd go home and beat myself up about not eating it. But it's interesting because it's interesting from the point of view of inclusion and whether the people who are organizing the gatherings are thinking about whether there are people there who have a different and we always complain when we first came that people weren't making allowances for Muslims and the fact that we need halal meat. And now it's sort of come full circle and we're the ones organizing and maybe we're not allowing, making provision for people who don't eat meat and who need a vegetarian or a vegan option. So that's interesting. To be fair to those organizers, for the most part, there always is something. And it's not because they're thinking about vegetarians. It's just that our diet does include lots of vegetables and dals and legumes and so on and so forth. So there is always an option. But January certainly has been a month of gatherings. And I've been to a umpteen. I sent you a menu from a presentation evening, very plush presentation evening that I was at just on Friday evening at one of my old schools for the school leavers. And they put on a real bash for them. But again, it was very similar, lots of meat options, but also, a fair share of vegetarian or vegan options as well.
I am conscious of the time. It is getting quite late. But how's your wife? I think that's it. She's the one who's doing all the cooking.
Yeah, she's doing it as well. She's doing
Yeah,
the only thing I worry about is that her version of any sort of thing where you cut things out is you cut things out, but you don't put anything in to replace them. So I worry about her health. So I often make her share what I'm eating, so that way I know that she's getting her fair share of vitamins and all the rest of it, because that's not something that she would naturally think about. And so yeah, I'm having to worry more about her health than I'm about my own. Because I do we do buy things obviously in the vegan world with some of these things added in, so that you do make sure that you do get the supplements and so on. But yeah, no, it's good, and we have a laugh and joke about it. The kids are sort of not buying into it. They're not being vegan, but they buy into it in the sense that they've all got my sense of humor, so they constantly wind me up about it and so on and so forth, which is great. But it also then raises questions about what we're eating and why we're eating it and all the rest of it, which is all interesting. And the word has got out there, so people do know that I'm doing this, which is great.
That's really good. Prashant, I don't know whether you got that video up. I do have a different video. Did you manage to get it up and running? Prashant? Yeah? Do you want to share it?
Yeah.
All right then.
All right.
Don't forget to share the sound as well.
Mm-hmm.
I kept forgetting.
So difficult. There we go. Can everybody see it?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We are now in Al-Mawasi in Karara. We are here to distribute some vegetables and food to the different refugees who's living in this camp. As you know, the situation here is very bad, and it's actually gotten a lot worse in the past days. So please continue to support Swan so we can continue to do our important work here inside Gaza. Assalamu alaikum.
I think that they've been doing a lot of work there, and they've managed to put water tankers in so that people have got water as well, as part of this project. But obviously things are getting worse in the last few days before the ceasefire was announced, and I think that they've already breached the ceasefire. So who knows what exactly is going to happen. I think it's really important that we keep putting pressure and keep our eyes on what's happening, because what tends to happen when they say that there's going to be a ceasefire, then they're like, oh well, everything's sorted now, and they take their eye off the ball. So but we appreciate everybody who's taking part in this and who's been raising money for this, and I think it's worth, I don't know, Prashant, did you want to do it on your screen or get up? I didn't actually get up Uncle Shabir's final total for this week yet.
I can pull it up. I can pull it up.
But hopefully next week we're going to have the CEO of Swan coming here to talk about the specific projects. And if anybody wants to share any of their pictures, I think I've got my pictures up on here for food. Or you want to do? Yeah, you share. Oh, fine. Oh, wow. That was very amazing.
That's amazing.
That's almost 2,000. Brilliant. That's a real jump from last week. So congratulations, Shabir. That's amazing. I know that your target was 5,000. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, we always set very, very challenging targets. Why would you do anything other than that? So I started resharing again this week. That's probably why it's gone up a bit. So I shared to all my local network, but I also then fired it out to some of my colleagues from schools I used to work in and things like that. So it's something we all need to do. We need to constantly keep sharing. It's not about me or this group. That's going to a really good cause, and that's the point I keep making. That all of us can afford to donate something. All of us, and giving is also, we talked about the social justice. It's also part of our sort of faith system that those of us that can afford to help others, we do, and we make a real point of that, and that benefits us as well as benefiting them. So it's really important, and it has. It was. I was getting a bit worried. It was sort of stuck around the 1,400 mark for about 5 or 6 days. It just didn't move. But then suddenly in the last couple of days, it's gone up by another 500-600. So that's great news.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think the meeting, I think we've gone a bit over today, but it was so fantastic. I want to thank Geordie and thank Arsia and Arsia's sister Irfana. It was really, really interesting questions as well. And thank you, Shabir, and thank your wife. We need to have her little input of how she's found it. Prashant?
I was gonna say yes, we should definitely have her join the session sometime. Uncle Shabir, I had a question for you.
Go for it.
You're looking like Jennifer Aniston after she went vegan. Have you lost?
Do I look old and worn?
No, how are you keeping up? Do you feel like you've lost weight or feeling more energetic?
Yeah, probably. Just before I started, I had a few health checks, and one of the checks they do weigh you, and I suddenly realized without realizing it, I've been around 77k for years, and suddenly when I went for the checkup, it was 81. So I'd put on a few kilos without realizing it. So alongside the vegan, I also cut out a lot of the stuff that I'm particularly addicted to without realizing. So I can quite easily open a packet of biscuits and then demolish the whole packet without realizing. So it's sort of, as I said to you, it raises awareness of what you're eating. So you do become very conscious of that, and it will have a positive effect. I am a little bit, not worried, but I do need to pay more attention to making sure that I'm getting all the right sort of mix of vitamins and all the rest of it. I'm very wary of supplements because it's a big commercial industry, and a lot of what's on the market it's got all the right things in it, but you don't know whether they're in a form which you can actually utilize in your body. So I do need to get better at understanding, how to make sure that what I'm consuming has got the right mix of vitamins and minerals and all the rest of it, and that they're in a form that my body can utilize. Because they don't tell you that, when they're selling this mixture that's got everything in it, and if only life was so simple, you take one pill and everything is fine, and life's not that simple. But yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling. A lot of people equate it with, you won't have energy. I don't have any of those issues. So whatever I'm doing, it's not damaging me.
That's really, really good to hear.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Super. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for everybody who's taking the time to attend and making this really special, and giving their input. We really appreciate it, and it's been really beautiful. I know I would have shared the pictures. I'll have to share this week's pictures next week. I'll add this week's pictures onto that, and then we can have a look at all of them. But speak to you all soon, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Geordie, it'd be lovely to have you join us next week too.